Okay. My name is Cassandra White. I'm a professor at Georgia State University Anthropology, and I'm going to be interviewing Earvin Casciano about his experience in the Peace Corps Fiji using a set of questions from the Peace Corps. So let's start with what brought you to join the Peace Corps?
What brought me to join the Peace Corps? This is probably the most personal question anyone can ask me because not many people know. I only told about 4 or 5 people in my group. The real reason, I was a premature baby for I was about 3 months or 2 months premature. Um, and I had a lot of health issues as a result of that when I was about 3 months old, 2 months old. I was born and then I was about 4 pounds barely and maybe like six odd ounces. And then when I was a few months old, maybe like 4 months, 5 months, I started getting checked into the hospital more and more because I had developmental issues. So I had water in my lungs, my heart failed twice, and I grew up a Roman Catholic. You know, and I believe I went through all that for a reason. And one of the biggest reasons as to that is I wanted to give back to the world and to the community and give myself to other people. So when I heard about the Peace Corps when I was a junior in high school, from my integrated science teacher, I'll never forget it. He just mentioned the Peace Corps to me, and then that's the first time I've ever heard it. I've ever heard the agency's name, and then I went home and I looked into it. And then once I looked into it and I looked into the mission, I'm like, this is exactly sort of what I would love to do because up until that point, I was just doing altar serving, I was doing Sunday school teaching, and I was just doing Red Cross volunteering and just little minor community service projects here, pretty consistently throughout my community. And that I felt like was the biggest challenge of all big challenges to handle that. And so I applied in spring of 2016 to Mongolia as a secondary education teacher. I got denied, and I was told I didn't get in until right by the cutoff date. And I was told that out of the 35 slots by the placement officer, that if someone declined, I would have gotten invited. That was in spring of 2016, right when I was getting ready to graduate college, because I was like, I'm graduating college. I'm not sure what my plans are. So let me just go right into the Peace Corps under the education sector, which is the biggest sector. About 45% of all Peace Corps volunteers serve in the education sector. But I didn't get in. And then I believe in fate and God putting you where you are meant to be. And then lo and behold, I did a mail corps, which is like the domestic Peace Corps. And then I applied to Ukraine initially, wasn't hearing anything back from them as a community economic development facilitator. And that was a completely different sector. That's more like income generation and community economics. And then I didn't really hear from that. And then I get the email on February 7th of 2018. I'll never forget it from the placement officer saying, Earvin, I've looked into your qualifications. I've spoken to the placement officer of Ukraine. I would like to invite you to interview for the community economic empowerment volunteer in the Fijian Islands under the youth and development sector, which is the smallest sector of the Peace Corps. Youth and development is the smallest sector. About 5% of all volunteers are under that uh, sector. So I applied. I got in. I applied, I did the interview. Well, I switched my process on February 7th. I said yes immediately. I'm in Fiji. And then the next week I had on the 13th, February 13th, I had of 2018, I had the interview. Of course, the online systems were cutting in and out, which I was used to, so we just rolled with it. And then less than 24 hours later, at 2 p.m. the next day on Valentine's Day of 2018, the same day that the Parkland shooting was happening, and I was working at a high school about 45 minutes away from there, um, I got the email at 2 o'clock for the invitation to serve in Fiji, and I couldn't focus on work anymore after that. I was over the moon excited. I debated it for only 10 hours, and my parents were all for it, and then I accepted it, and then that's what started the journey.
That's wonderful. And I think, yeah, that's really interesting too, that you remember the exact times and dates that everything happened because it's such a
I will never
monumental
forget.
change. Yeah,
I remember who I was meeting. I remember what I was doing. I remember almost what I was wearing. I'll never forget it.
that's very cool. Okay, back to the questions. In what way do you feel your ethnicity, racial identity, minority background supported and strengthens your service with Peace Corps?
So it supported my service because Fiji is a very patriarchal culture. There are some villages in Fiji and that are more traditional in the sense that the elders are have the respect, and the men and the young men are, and the younger you are, the less authority and the less authority and kind of say you have in the village. The women don't really have much say, sadly. Again, it's patriarchal. So to answer this question, I was seen as a white guy, and this was the very first time that my cultural identity was put to the test, really, because growing up in America, I identified as Puerto Rican, I identified as Latino Hispanic, I did not identify as white. But in the context of the Fijian culture, because of my skin tone, and it was paler than almost everyone else's, I was considered white. I was considered a white male, which in that culture is absolutely top of the line, right there with the elderly men of the village. So when I got to my host village in Vunisole in the province of Televu, it was myself, my friend who was about 65, white hair, and when we had the opening meeting of the opening ceremony in the introduction in the welcoming ceremony to the village community, my friend and we sat next to the chief, right next to the chief. He sat right next to the chief, and then I sat next to him. And then our female counterparts were further down the line. And all Fijians traditionally sit in a mat. They sit on the floor, crisscross applesauce. And that was my first instance of, okay, but I felt very uncomfortable by it initially. Because I was not comfortable with that authority. I was not comfortable with that amount of respect, and I especially didn't feel comfortable not having done anything to deserve it. Number one, and number two, the my fellow female counterparts who are just on the same level of status as I am as a Peace Corps volunteer, they're further down the line. But what I've realized about really any successful Peace Corps endeavor is you have to release some of your American ideals, and you're going to have to at least consider the host country's ideals. And that's a very delicate balance, and that's going to be different for every single volunteer because that's your personal values and your country values going against the personal values of the community, of the person, of the native, and of the country. And in the process of Peace Corps, it's all about community. It's all about community capacity building and peace and friendship and love. So, which is all I'm all for it. I am not at all a violent person. So, if we're going to do diplomatic things, I'd rather them do it. I'd rather we all do it cooperatively. And then, so that's what happened with that. And then I came a long way with it because I started to just embrace it and use my authority and power to bring up the women in the village, which is why I tried to focus on, before I got evacuated, I was focusing on a bakery for the women's group so that women could generate income and they can contribute to the village. And also, I wanted to teach the women um, financial literacy skills, budgeting, spreadsheets, and that sort of thing, so they can teach the men and they can feel empowered to teach the men. That was one of my goals the last 6 months of my service. And then unfortunately, COVID, you know, robbed me of that opportunity. But I ended up using my identity of what they saw me as to the advantage of the community, not just for my own doing, but to
Exactly.
turn it to the community, and I think it worked out really, really well. How I was received and how I left in the village, I was extremely, extremely respected by
Hmm.
everybody, and I didn't. That wasn't by chance. That was me through grit. That was me through work. That was me through talking and just even when I was sitting in kava circles, even if I wasn't saying anything, just talking to them, and that's just another key thing. You're gonna have to embrace some aspects of the culture. The culture is going to surprise you in some ways, but you need to show an effort in whatever way that works for you and whatever way that's comfortable for you. Show an effort because I was very, very different than my predecessor, and I had to make sure that that boundary was already established. That I'm not going to be like the predecessor, the first Peace Corps volunteer the village had. I was going to do things my own way and do things differently, and it was definitely it took a convincing and just but it was just a tenacious approach, and that's how my racial identity was sought throughout my Peace Corps service for sure.
That's excellent and very interesting about the gender dynamics too, and that you're not. It's not that you're really exploiting that fact that you have maybe more respect or power, but kind of using that and being culturally relative. That's what's really important too, and understanding that those are their values and being able to like make a difference in that way, like by understanding that, respectful. So the next question was what most valued, and this is a similar question in a way, like, but what most valued elements of your background were you able to share with community members in Fiji?
The most common elements of my background. Now, is that my professional background or was that my personal background?
I think they mean, I think it means your cultural background, your, and not just your identity, but like maybe your family background and things that you
My
learned.
family background, so they would ask me about life in America, and I would tell them I grew up in a military family, so I was very disciplined. My school principal was very, very adamant. He told me about that all the time. He's like, Cassie, you're more disciplined than Zachariah, than my predecessor, because my predecessor would do a lot of kava and he would just go around and he would do things. But also, to be fair to him, he was also the first volunteer ever. That's the first time that community ever had one. So he was new to it. They were new to it. So the structure with the village in terms of the village culture around the volunteer, that wasn't really set in stone yet. I already had when I came in, that was already kind of set in stone. They already knew what I was gonna do. They already knew what I could do because of my predecessor. So that kind of made my job easier. But my military background in terms of being very, very disciplined, being very, very punctual, being very, very organized and orderly, that was something that was time and again told to me by my community, both at the school and in the village, of how I was different than my predecessor. If you are thinking about joining the Peace Corps or you're in the Peace Corps and you're replacing somebody else, you're gonna get compared by the community in some way, shape, or form to that predecessor. So the best thing for you to do is possibly to acknowledge that from the very beginning and just establish that you're gonna do things that like I acknowledge this other person, I acknowledge what they did, and I thank them for it. But it also set the standard that you're gonna do things differently. So my organization, my discipline, my punctuality, my hardworkingness. I was always at work from like 7 to 4 at school. And then I was at a set schedule. So military background, we had a very set schedule. Mondays I was in town. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday I was at school. Friday and the weekend I was in the village. That was pretty much my schedule about 80% of my time. Unless I had a training, unless I was doing some self-care things, that was that. So that was my personal and professional background and how that went into it. Personally, I'm a very empathetic person. I'm a very, very loving person. I have been told by countless people that I have a heart of gold and um, that I'm just very easy to talk to. So I used that to my advantage as well to embrace the community. Fijians are at their core, they're very, very hospitable. They're very, very loving. And if you show them respect of their culture and just abiding or at least trying to abide by their culture, you will get so much more in return and so much more accomplished because they will talk about it. I'm gone in the village, I'm gone in town, but I guarantee you every day that I was gone in town working on projects and everything else, the village was talking. I promise you. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I promise you they were talking. So that was another reason why my personality was my attributes were really beneficial to my Peace Corps service for sure.
Hmm. And this one, you might have already answered some of this, but because you gave some advice already to other, potential Peace Corps volunteers. But what advice would you provide to another volunteer of similar background, ethnicity, minority background, to ensure their success as a future partner of sustainable development in Fiji?
Great question. So, a couple things. First, I'm a true believer that you have to want to be there. You have to fully commit and want to be there. That's number one. I fully wanted to be there. I was being a Peace Corps volunteer was a dream of mine since I was about 17 years old that I made come true about 10 years later. And I'll never, and that's why that moment of getting that invitation is so crystal clear in my head, because that was one of the long achieving dreams that I had for 9 years was finally realized. But you have to know why you're there and you have to want to be there. And there's going to be hard days. There are going to be hard days for sure. There's going to be medical issues potentially. There's going to be drama that you could be roped into within the community. You're not going to understand what's going on. They're not going to really understand what's going on. So if you remind yourself as to why you're there and you take time to process that however you need to, internally, externally, talking to somebody, writing things down, talking to somebody who you trust 100%. Um, that is definitely critical. Now for someone from my background, take it a day at a time. It's not going to be accomplished overnight. Take it a day at a time and try to be fully present with the community. What I did is if I was wandering around the village, which is pretty much all I did on the weekends. Um, and I would just talk to people. I didn't have my phone on me. I was on my phone in the morning, and then I was on my phone in the evenings or in the late afternoons, and then again in the evenings. But if I was walking around the village, I never had my phone on, not a single time. Why? I wanted to be fully present with them. Most of my village, natives didn't have phones. Not let alone not just smartphones. Forget smartphones, just regular phones, like flip phones. I can only count maybe four people that had phones, and we had like one Toyota truck, and then we had the lorry, which is pretty much the bus equivalent of a bus, to get us to school. So being fully present with that, and also be patient with yourself, and then practice in self-care. Not every day is going to be great. You're going to have some struggles. There was times that I woke up and I had a urinary tract infection overnight, and I had to be evacuated all of a sudden to Shiva. And that completely screwed up my plans because I was on school break for those 2 weeks, yes, but I was fully focused on just being in my village for the first week because the second week I was going on to Suva for training, and then it happened overnight. It was on a Sunday morning. I woke up and then I just had the urinary tract infection. I called my nurse. My nurse said, "Leave your village. You're going to Suva immediately." They put me in Savu Savu. They put me in a hotel. The next day I flew out to Suva. It was so you can be something can happen medically to you at any time. Your body is adjusting to a culture, to a climate, and a culture that has less resources than America. So your body's going to be reacting to that. You're not only going to be reacting to that mentally, you're not only going to be reacting to that psychologically, but you're also going to be reacting to that physically. And you can absolutely and if you're not careful, you can get um taken out way before you want to. And there's a reason why the Peace Corps medical um, process and the nurses and the medical staff on staff in the country is phenomenal. There's a running joke in the Peace Corps that you get better medicine and medical treatment as a Peace Corps volunteer than you ever do in America. And I can fully agree with that because of how quickly I was treated, how quickly I was taken in, and everything else. But if you're really invested in the community and you're invested in some projects and some work, and you're especially you have to take time away that you're not expecting to, that can have some mental detriment. That can be detriment to your mental health if you're not careful. So you also have to know yourself. You also have to know yourself. That's extremely, extremely important. I think a lot of Peace Corps volunteers, when you're, younger, 21, I don't know if I could do the Peace Corps when I was 21, 22. I don't think I had the mental aptitude for it. I didn't do it until I was about 26 or 25. You know, obviously every person is going to be different, but you have to know yourself really, really well. Number one, you have to know how you're going to react to things. You have to know how do you handle setbacks when something unexpected comes up. How do you handle it? If you can answer all those questions before you even get to the country, you'll be a lot. The process will be a lot smoother potentially for you. So that would be another piece of advice that I would have.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain level of maturity, and then also, to kind of to do the whole process. And but then that's really good advice to just know that the Peace Corps is there for you if you are having a medical emergency, and that's what I've heard too. They will do everything they can to make
Yes, they
sure you're
will.
taken care of.
Yes, they will.
That's good. Okay, so how did your service in Peace Corps Fiji impact or influence your personal, professional goals, and how do you think it will
Oh,
impact your future?
so many ways. So many ways. So I can't talk about this. I can't answer this question without first acknowledging the Mail Corps, because if I didn't do a Mail Corps, which is the domestic Peace Corps, as I've mentioned before, I don't think I would have gotten into the Peace Corps. That's number one. Number two, I don't think I would have been as prepared to do the Peace Corps abroad without that Mail Corps experience, because I jumped away from the Mail Corps right into Peace Corps. So I already lived on a stipend in the Mail Corps in Florida, in South Florida. So I was living on a stipend again, and the only thing that changed was a different country and different currency. That's really it. Um, but how it impacted it's made me more patient. I'm from Jersey originally in the Northeast. We're just crazy drivers and we speed all the time and everywhere else. We don't use the blinkers half the time. I'm not like that. I was like that before Fiji. I'm not like that anymore. I'm like, Makaleka. That means that's Fijian for no worries in my village dialect. I'm so much more relaxed about everything, especially time, because it's called Fiji time. It's called Fiji time, or you can probably say it's island time, but that is a legit thing. So if you're coming from the hustle and bustle of America, from Atlanta, LA, Chicago, someplace that is really, really busy all the time, and you're going to a country that is much slower pace, you have to know that from the get-go ahead of time, because otherwise that is going to be a huge culture shock for you. And you're going to struggle if you don't if you start resisting it and you start really finding yourself frustrated by it. It will be Your service could be a lot more difficult than it needs to be, and it already is. But there's some things that you just have to, again, and that's tailored to knowing yourself. But professionally, it made me go into social work. I never considered the field of social work at all until the Peace Corps. I was in AmeriCorps, and I was thinking about being a school guidance counselor, because I was a graduation coach and I was working side by side with the guidance counselors. I was a trained education major. I knew teaching. I found out that through AmeriCorps that counseling, I was a better counselor than I was a teacher. But then I found out through Peace Corps, I'm a way better social worker than I am a counselor, because I have all the attributes. And it was given to me by a friend of mine. We were out to dinner in a town called Labasa in our island of Winalevu, and she has her bachelor's in social work. She's going to get her master's in social work, and she just told me over dinner. She's like, "Earvin, you'd be an amazing social worker." She just dropped that bomb on me. Dropped that bomb. Didn't No precursor. We weren't on the topic at all. It was just I was just sitting there, just looking at the menu, thinking about something to eat, and it just hit her. She said it, and I kept asking. I'm like, "Why did you say that? Like, did it just come?" She's like, "It just was a feeling," because her and I were very, 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 very similar in terms of upbringing, in terms of personality, in terms of value system. So we got along really, really well. And then she told me that. And then in the Peace Corps, you have nothing but time in the Peace Corps, more time than you do in America, because you don't have the access to technology, you don't have nearly as many distractions, there's not nearly as many things to do. So if you are a potential volunteer and you are unsure, or you're a Peace Corps volunteer and you're unsure of what you want to do post Peace Corps, use your Peace Corps experience and your free time in the country to try and figure it out, because that will be you will have ample time to do that, and you will have more time to do that than you will ever would in America, because we have all the distractions in this culture. And she told me social work, and then I planted the seed. August 2019, I started looking into it and I started studying it. And every chance that I got, if I wasn't talking to friends or watching movies or engaging in self-care or training or working in the village or at school, I was studying social work and looking into social work. So I bought social work books. I was researching what I could do within the field, and that's how I came back to America with a much more solid, concrete plan than a lot of my predecessors had, who, when we were all evacuated, a lot of Peace Corps volunteers were in limbo. They weren't really sure what to do. I just had to move up my plan 7 months early. And that was very, very comforting. I'm a person that likes to deal with structure. That's part of my military background as well. It's very structured, it's very orderly, it's very specific, and that's how I operate my life. And that's another thing that helped with my Peace Corps service. But without the Peace Corps, I would not have applied to grad school for social work. I would not be even considering social work. I have no idea what I would be doing right now if it wasn't for social work in the Peace Corps. So that is the long answer to how it's benefited my professional career, and I'm so thankful to the agency and to Fiji for that, and to my friends who have thanked about 5 million times.
That's excellent. I think you make a great social worker as well. So.
Well, thank you.
Okay, this is the final question that they had. Like, what was your greatest takeaway from your service as a Peace Corps volunteer to the people of Fiji?
My greatest takeaway as a Peace Corps volunteer from the people of Fiji or to the people of Fiji?
I think they mean, so I'm interpreting the question as just what was your greatest takeaway from your service as a Peace Corps? And then it was like a Peace Corps volunteer to Fiji. Yeah.
That's such a great question.
I think you could say more than one thing. I don't know. They probably
Yeah.
let you say
Yeah,
one, but
no,
I
it's no, it's what is my biggest takeaway? That I'm a social worker. I've learned professionally that I'm a social worker, and my friend and I were having many, many conversations about micro, macro, and meso, and she said that every Peace Corps volunteer is a social worker, and we're working on all three levels. In the community, we're working on the micro level. When we go to offices in the capital for like the embassies, that's the national level or the macro level, and then the meso level is the community. Or the micro level is really just talking to individuals or talking to families, which is something I did on a daily basis. So it made me realize I have a lot of social work experience, because the more I realized and I delved into the profession, the more I realized all of my experience, even in AmeriCorps, from all of my experience volunteering, advocating for others, helping others, giving them resources, all that social work, all that can be tied into social work in some realm of the huge umbrella that it is. And that was the most powerful realization, because I not only realized this is what I'm meant to do, but this is something that I've been doing without even knowing it, without being completely unaware. And it's consistently been on top of my mind. And I'm so thankful to the Fijians, because they taught me how to relax more. Because even now, it's almost, 3 weeks. March 18th of 2021 will be a very tough day for me, because that was the day that I was evacuated. I don't know how I'm going to feel when that day comes, when I see all my Facebook posts and I see the memories and I see what's going on. I don't know how that's going to invoke the emotions in me, but they made me the Fijian community and culture made me a happier person. They made me appreciate the little things more. They made me appreciate just being the community, the sense of societal community upbringing, which America has gotten way away from into way too of an individualized culture. Fiji's not like that. Fiji, if you need anything in a Fijian culture, in a Fijian village, you can go to any house at any time as long as you go to the back door and you can just ask and they will give it to you. I was roaming on the village and I was kasi guno tea, kasi mahikana, which is eating or drinking tea to every house. And some Peace Corps volunteers that they would be late to school, and being late in Fiji is not really a big deal because time is so relative there. And it just made me just more relaxed in terms of deadlines, in terms of time, and it made me appreciate the smaller things more, which I'm extremely grateful to the Fijian culture for. And that's one of the things I'm still struggling with now, is just because I still want to just go back to it. I still want to just take myself out of America and just go back for like a weekend and just go back to my village and do absolutely nothing but drink kava and eat and sleep. That's all I want to do. That's all I want to do. And in that culture, that is completely not only approved, but it's thoroughly encouraged. The
And
women would love to feed me, and the men would just love to just have me take a nap and then wake up hours later and then eat again and then go back to sleep. That's completely a-okay in that culture, and I miss it so much.
and I know you'll be able to go back too. And I also think, in addition to like being a social worker without knowing it, like I think you're also an anthropologist without knowing it too. So to get
Probably,
full
I mean, probably,
so it's a
probably.
similar perspective of just being able to actually experience the culture and be a participant observer, which you were in the Peace Corps, and you clearly, really got to understand that culture. So, do
Yes.
you have any final statement for this interview, or just? I mean, I
Uh,
could just say I know you'll be able to go back and you'll have a chance to. So,
I'm going to go back. I guess my only final statement would be to Curry, to Clayton, and to the rest of the staff, and not only in the Peace Corps office, but just the natives in the ministries. I am so thankful, and I thank the Peace Corps Fiji staff for hosting me and supporting me, and I thank the Fijian government, and I thank the native officials of the country for allowing me to go to the country and really impact it. Not entirely the way I would have liked, because there was a couple things that I did not get to finish, which I'm still unhappy about. But the things that I did do, I'm immensely proud of. And the Peace Corps is we can't be there. I The Peace Corps, when I was founded, we can't be there unless the native country governments want us there. Period. We can say we're gonna do all these great things, but they have to allow us and they have to want us to be there. And the only way that that is possible is by the Peace Corps' reputation globally and also in the country. And I'm very blessed to say that Peace Corps Fiji is, well, Fiji, in terms of when the Fijians or Fiji thinks about the Peace Corps, it's a very, very, very high standard. It's a very, very good reputation. So they will continue to. We are actually approaching the 60th anniversary of Fiji in about another. On the 28th of February that's officially Peace Corps Week, because Peace Corps was founded on March 1st, 1961, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, when JFK made that famous speech. So that's a little bit of history for anyone listening. And that is important. That's an important milestone to recognize, because I came in on the, let me see, what was it? The 50th anniversary, maybe. I came for Peace Corps Fiji's been around since 1968. I came in 2018. So, and I miss Fiji so much. I wish my community had more money to top up their cellular devices, so when have to have data so we can talk. But many people in my culture, in my village, don't have that luxury. So I can't see them. The best way for me to see them is for me to physically go back. and I'm looking forward to going back. I'm a little scared to go back because I'm not sure how it's gonna feel when I land in the LAX and I see the Fiji Airway plane, and I get on that plane and I hear the music that I can still hear if I close my eyes, and then I see the hospitality of the Fijian, not only pilots but the flight attendants, and then I have that 10.5 hour flight. I have no idea what I'm gonna feel like when I land. I'm gonna be excited, but I'm probably gonna be really, really emotional and really on edge, maybe because I left in such a traumatic fashion, So, but I'm deeply grateful, and I consider myself Fijian for the rest of my life. I actually had dinner with another friend of mine who actually served a year. She served in a group that served, but I was in Group 95, Group 94. I had dinner just today, with a friend of mine from a Group 93, and we were just talking about our experiences in Fiji. So, hopefully I'll be able to. And there's apparently more Peace Corps Fiji volunteers in the Atlanta area. So I'm very, very excited to meet with them for sure. But that's all I would have to say about that. I'm extremely grateful to them.
Well, that's wonderful. And yeah, I think you've contributed to that positive reputation of Peace Corps abroad. And I know they miss you over there, but you'll be able to go back. So.
I will.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to
Thank
stop
you.
the
Bye.
recording.